All right, welcome back to the Veterinary Ledger Podcast. This is the show designed exclusively for veterinary practice owners. Each week, we're going to break down numbers, strategies, and real-world decisions that drive successful hospitals. Today, I'm excited. Megan and I have Eric Miller. Eric Miller is with Econologics Financial Advisors. Eric, tell us who you are. Tell us what Econologics is all about.
Yeah, pretty simple. Back in 2008, we decided to start a financial planning company, and we did it in probably the worst year that you could possibly ask people for money. But we knew we wanted to specialize in working with healthcare. I've come from a healthcare background. I saw how people that get in the healthcare industry, specifically veterinarian, they get into it because they love dealing with patients. The money side, they're not so good with it. So we decided that's the tribe that we want to help. And ever since 2008, that's what we've been doing. We work primarily with private practice veterinarians, although we do scatter some dentists and optometrists and some other type of specialties in there as well.
That's excellent. I mean, I feel like finance, kind of like tax, it can be like a scary topic to understand and dip your toe in. If there's any basics, what I don't practice on, what are some basic things I should be looking at, thinking about to kind of dip my toes into the world of finance?
It's a good question. Don't be afraid to confront it. I think finances comes down to, I was just scribbling one day. I was like, really, it comes down to three basic things. You got to know how to acquire money. You got to know how to control money, and you have to know how to expand money. And if you can do those three things really, really well, now they didn't teach you that in veterinary school. I'm positive of that. They didn't teach you that anywhere. But if you can think that way, that's simple, like it's just a basic triangle. We call it the ACE triangle. How do you acquire money? Obviously, you have to know how to market, promote, and sell and ask for money. How do you control it? Make sure that you know where the money's going to go, keep good records, just control money. And then obviously kind of our arena, how do you expand money? Where do we put the money that it will multiply and it will create more? Do we reinvest back in our business? Do we, invest in a building? Do we create other income sources? So we just kind of keep it that simple. I'm not asking anyone to learn fancy, advanced accounting. I'll leave that to you, Jharid. You just have to know some basics. And I think that's where it starts.
When you say control, is that, a household budget? Is that understanding the practice, financial statements, the balance sheet, and income statement? What do you mean by control the flow of funds?
I think it's both. When you can, money is controllable, but there are some people that you give them money and it just goes away. And that's kind of a natural law. It seems like of money and organizations, they'll try to spend everything that they make and then some. I'm sure you've seen that too. So when I say control, it's no, I'm in control of this, this thing, this energy, whatever you want to define it as. I can put it wherever I want to. It doesn't overwhelm me. So when I say good control, it's when the money comes in, I know where it's going. I know what the purpose is of where the money is going. And I have the ability to start, change, and stop anything when it comes to my money. And I think that's what control actually means.
Can I talk to me or expand? Because if you get I guess there's stages to the business life cycle, right? A startup is nervous to expand because all their cash is being poured back into practice. But when's the right time to start expanding, to start putting monies into different vehicles, retirement, real estate, so on and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I don't know if I got it completely figured out on the right time to expand. I'm always up for practice expansion. We've been telling people for, veterinarians forever, the practice is your biggest investment. You're not going to get rich on an S&P 500 index fund. You're going to get rich because you run a really good practice. You create an environment where it can expand. You own the real estate if you can. And you've seen the numbers are astounding on what the multiples are for practices now. I mean, it's crazy. So I think that's where your wealth really can expand. But at the same time, I would not be dependent upon just the sale of the practice for my quote unquote retirement. So that's why we try to get people to start creating a system of how do we extract profits out of the business? How do we channel that to the household that we can create other income sources, whether that's in retirement accounts, whether that's in real estate, whether that's in, alternative investments or whatever your investment strategy is. But I've always learned, maybe my dad told me this, don't ever rely on one of anything. And I think that's good financial advice as well.
So I was reading the book that you guys put out for veterinarians, which hopefully we can talk about that
Yeah.
And one of the things that struck with me is that it's like math, right? You either get it or you don't. And so I think that there's so many practice owners out there that are trying to wear all of the hats and doing all of the things and
Yeah.
think that they maybe understand it, but don't quite. So are there some key indicators that maybe you're like, oh, this is not for you. Let's phone a friend and get some help?
In terms of like the business finances,
Or growing their funds or saving for the future?
yeah, I mean, we have like a whole list of like, I have financial indicators that we'll look at in the business, and then financial metrics or key performance indicators that we'll look for the household. I'll start with the business. And Jared and I talked about this earlier. Do you have, 2 months of emergency funds? I think that's a good indicator, like that your practice is growing and it's healthy. You had mentioned accounts receivable. Do you have a lot of outstanding money that's owed? Do you know like what your make break number is, and is it correct? I think a lot of people, like when I ask them what their make break number is, they'll give me a number, but then we kind of reconfigure it. Like that doesn't really include your profits or anything like that. They're like, oh yeah, you're right. So, and then obviously profit margin, or, the EBITDA number, not to confuse people. I think Jared gave a good definition of that when we talked last, but I think those are some key performance indicators for the household. I like to make sure that from a household perspective, are you creating other income sources? That certainly is one that we'll look at. Like, we have a metric to measure your passive income. Like, okay, we're building your passive income. We will look at obviously some personal debt ratios as well, because I don't mind debt. I really don't. I just think you have to know the difference between destructive debt and constructive debt. To me, business debt, that's always constructive. Some of the stuff that people buy in their personal lives is not always like, okay, make an argument for me, but we'd like to have that personal debt paid off before they sell their practice, just so they can keep a majority of the proceeds. Cause that's probably one of the most discouraging things. Somebody sells for like $5 million, and then all of a sudden they got to pay $1 million here, 2 million here, and they're like left with $500,000.
Goes quick. It goes really quick.
It does go quick. So, those are some things that we look at, but there's probably more. I'm sure there's more, but those are the top of mind things that I think you would want to track.
I think that's helpful, right? Those are actionable things that I know I can look at today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Staying on that debt topic, constructive, destructive, student loans, where's that enter the equation from VetMed, and how do you plan around that with personal finances?
I mean, first off, I'll tell you, when I first started and I tried to look at the most successful owners that I ever had, not over like a 1 to 2 year period, but over like a 5 to 10 year period. And all of them, the ones that were really successful later on down the line, they had a common denominator, is that that's kind of inevitable, especially if you're going to go to school. You're going to come out. I think the worst case I saw was something like $500,000 of debt. They must have went to like Cornell or Penn or something like that, where it's just, ridiculous. But the ones that just kind of attacked it right away, right? They still kind of live like, and this is very unpopular. I will get that, right? This is wildly unpopular take, but I'm just going by my observations. The ones that attacked it, got it under control, not necessarily paid it all off, but really tried to get it down as much as they possibly can, got really competent at being a veterinarian, still kind of live like a student and didn't like overspend on stupid BMWs and, $900,000 homes or whatever like that. Like 5 to 7 years later, they were all in really excellent shape. So I guess my point of that whole thing is that in life, it's very rare. Like if you and I borrow money from a bank, I just can't go back to them 5 years later and say, hey, can you forgive me on this? The real life doesn't necessarily work that way. So you borrow the money. I think you should take responsibility for it and pay it back. Again, I know I'll just turn off most people on that statement. But I think it seems to me to be the right thing to do. Maybe I just am old and I come from a different generation. Who knows?
Talk about a hot take to stir the pot. I like it. I like
There you
it.
go.
No, we get it all the time. It's because, hey, do I go married joint or married separate? We're an income-based repayment. And we always say, like, there's some meaningful tax consequences for filing separate route. And if we're making the money that we hope to make as a practice owner, it's going to be very hard to control the income repayment plan restructured to it. Can you do it for the first couple of years? I think so. I haven't found great success years 3, 4, 5 and beyond that you can control the income to kind of delay and defer, hopefully forgive the student loans down the road.
Yeah. And hopefully is the key word. I try to just to have as much control over your outcomes as possible. But I get it. There's going to be different situations for that. That's kind of just like my blanket opinion. Maybe my advisors would probably have some, different opinions on that as well. But that's just kind of the way I look at it. But then again, you know what? When I went to school, debt wasn't $500,000. It wasn't $300,000. I think I walked out with maybe like $40,000 worth of debt, which, back then seemed like a lot of money. But anyway, I don't know if I have a great answer on that, but that's my hot take for the day.
Right. Walk us through more the Econologics process. What's the process if I'm a client interacting with you and your team?
Yep.
What should I be used to? What should I be experiencing?
Yeah, pretty simple. I think the first thing that we try to get people to understand is like, I am there to make sure that your household is financially set. We want to make sure that you are debt free, invested, and we get your household set for life. But we also understand that the practice is the biggest investment that your household has. And it is the most valuable. It creates most of the cash flow. And so we had to understand something about the business side of veterinary medicine. If I thought we were going to be like a true fiduciary, which is, I think the gold standard of financial care, that I want my advisors to know like the business side of these things. I'm not telling people like to fire this person or to hire this person or do anything like that, but we do want to make sure that you pay attention to your practice finances. But we build a roadmap for you. We look at like 9 different areas that make up your financial life. We have assessments that people can take so they can see exactly. I'm big on the like results based and outcomes. And I like to measure things. I don't like it just to say, well, how do you know your advisor did a good job for you? I don't know. I guess my account values are up. And I'm like, is that it? Like, it's just based upon performance of an investment account. Like, what about your debt and credit, your estate plan, your asset protection, your exit plan, all these other things that I think, a financial advisor that understands your industry can really show you how to do those things. So that's what our process is. It's, we don't like just to meet with people occasionally or frequently. I think the standard for most advisors is maybe once or twice a year to do like a portfolio review. That's not our service model. It's, it could be every month, at least quarterly, with doing reviews every year so we can develop a cadence and a consistency. And it's not always exciting, but I can promise you we keep your attention on your finances, because the worst thing that can happen is you take your attention off of your finances. That's when money goes everywhere and bad decisions happen.
Not a set it and forget it, right? We're
definitely, and we would consider like I don't want to call us an active manager, but we're definitely an active participant in making sure we hold them accountable, get them organized and hold them accountable. Look, all the information out there is, like I said, you can go on ChatGPT and pretty much find anything that you want to. On accounting, you can go to the tax code. It's wide open, although you're not going to convince me of trying to sit down and understand it.
So good reading.
That's right. It's all out there. So I think people really pay us, and probably, you guys as well, because we do a really good job of organizing, and we do, I think, a really good job of holding people accountable for actions. And, quite frankly, make sure that they don't do stupid things, which can tend to happen.
Do you tell them, no, don't buy that boat?
Oh, I've said it doesn't always work, but I'll do my best. I'll be like, it's probably we're having a good, your condition's getting better and you want to just like what do you want to do? I think the worst one was like, we're going to go invest in an oil well in Belize. And I'm like, what? Like, you'd be surprised at some of the things people can come up with. People on social media are extremely convincing. So, another thing that we'll do is make sure that there's like an investment policy. Like, these are things that you can do, and these are things that you probably shouldn't do. Okay. Lending money to irresponsible people is probably a bad idea. So don't do that. All right. Investing in your brother-in-law's weed company is probably not a good idea. So maybe don't do that, especially if you're in the healthcare industry, which I had someone do. Stuff like that.
I love it. I love it. But you guys did write a book. Can you tell us a little bit about the veterinary specific
Yeah,
book?
I think we wrote a book. We wrote a couple of them, but the one that you're talking about is the Financial Success Guide for Veterinarians. And again, I think the main concepts are your practice is your largest investment. Treat it like an investment, not a job. Your household, though, is what we would consider your parent company. Like if you look at corporate America, most of these big corporations have like a parent company that, even all these veterinary groups out there, they have like a parent company. And that controls everything else. Well, your household's really no different. The household owns the business, the real estate, the 401ks, the bank accounts, everything else. And it should be not looked at as just like, well, I'll take care of my household secondarily. It's like, no, I mean, let's make sure that as the practice grows, the household actually benefits as well. And, it doesn't happen to what a lot of veterinarians do. It's like 15 years in and, they don't really have much, which is kind of depressing. So we try to like not do that.
What's your take on a practice? You said it's your biggest asset. You go through the liquidity event. It happens, right?
Yeah.
You're now in a cash position you've never been in before. We've seen a bunch where all of a sudden that practice owner now wants to give to charity more than they ever have in their life. And they want to give to family members and friends. And all of a sudden, like you said, hey, we still got taxes to worry about. We have some debts to pay off. What's your advice for someone who had just had their event? What do you do for that person who's 12 months?
Yeah, I think, and we're still kind of studying this too, because it has been pretty wild. Like I said, the last 7 years has really been where this proliferation of practice sales. So, I think I learned early on that you should have a plan of where the money's going to go before it gets wired and hits your account. Because if you don't have a plan for it, here's what's going to happen. Two things that generally happen. Number one, just like I don't know what it is, but when someone all of a sudden gets a lot of money, it's like the sharks come out of nowhere and just start like, okay, maybe you should do this. Maybe you should do that, and there's like, and people start making bad decisions. So have a plan of where your money is going to go prior to when it comes in. That way you don't do the two things. Either you listen to every other person's opinion, or you're so scared to death that something that's going to happen to it, you just let it sit in a checking account earning 1%, and I think those are a couple of things that I would certainly do. But you also have to really understand too, that, when you start coming into 5, 10, 15, I mean, I'm sure you guys have seen those kinds of, liquidity events. You can't treat the money like you did prior. Like your investment strategy has to be a little bit more on the cautious side, because now I got to protect this. And every family office person I've talked to that manages money for like $100 million people or $200 million people, like they're not looking at, hey, rates of return and, what was the performance of this investment? They are risk management. They're like, you worked really hard for this money. I don't want to lose it. I don't want to be the one that loses it for you. So we tend to take a bit more of a, I want to say conservative approach, but a risk management approach of making sure that money is going to last them for the rest of their lives without really having to touch the principal, which I think is kind of a goal of ours. I don't ever want to see somebody's net worth go down. Like I want to see it continue to go up. So if we can structure a plan where they can just live on the investment proceeds, either from the sale or their rental real estate. The building's always been an awesome income source for people. That's why I highly encourage you, I'm sure you do too, from a tax perspective and an income perspective, try to own the building, because it really is a pretty awesome asset to own. So those are some things that we do, but I just think you have to think a little differently than I'm just going to stick all my money in, a stock and bond portfolio of some kind. Because I've seen that happen. And then like that happened in 2022 and the market was down like 30%. And can you imagine, like, I got $5 million and now I have $3 million, and you're just like, oh gosh. So
I would imagine the emotional side of that is, and that must switch at night.
Yeah, so we try to avoid that as much as we can. And then from an income perspective, I mean, I'm sure you like it when you can create as much tax-free income as possible as well, with large proceeds. Municipal bonds become a friend of yours when you have that much money, and, other things that probably people haven't really heard of or invested in.
Understood. Aaron, want to be mindful of your time. I'm a big believer that you learn from history and events in the past. And I know it looks like history was your first passion, right?
Yeah. Well, I was a history major. I've become very fascinated with like the Revolutionary War period. I've read a couple books from a historian called David McCullough. I don't know if you ever heard of him or not, but he's like a really famous historian. So I kind of dig some of that.
What can we learn from history as relates to finance?
Oh, geez. Thomas Jefferson was an absolute train wreck when it came to his finances. How about that? That's one thing you can learn. Benjamin Franklin wrote a really simple book called The Way to Wealth. It's probably like 15 pages long, or maybe it's a little bit, it's very thin. But man, it had some of the greatest basic principles about money and finances that you can possibly think of. So I know that you hear a lot of this noise today, things are different. What else? We're in a new era, crypto's taking over, government fiat is going by the wayside. I mean, all these things are true to some degree, but I do think basic principles always seem to win in the end. Don't spend more than what you make. Make sure that you're carving out a portion of your income to create, other income sources. Have reserves, invest prudently, know what you're going to invest in and why. All these things really are time tested. And I think, if history's taught us anything, is that we're going to have a boom and we're going to have a bust. And the next bust is, I'm sure, on its way. I don't know when, I don't know where, I don't know what it's going to look like, but what kind of plan do you have? Because there is a default plan for most people, and that is seemingly to have them broke. And the only reason I say that is because if you look at 75% of Americans out there, 75% of Americans live pretty poorly, and I don't know if that's by design or it's just because they haven't been educated. Either way, it's still a bad outcome. So, that's kind of the, why we do what we do. I'm sure that's why you do what you do as well. But, if you don't understand taxes, if you don't understand inflation, if you don't understand, the game of money, then you're going to lose. And if you don't have a plan, you're definitely going to lose. So I think it all is good to start with having a plan.
Having a plan, having good advisors around you like yourself, Eric
Oh, man.
Miller.
Thank you.
Econologics, appreciate you on the podcast. Megan mentioned, where can we find the book?
So you can go to our website, Econologics Financial Advisors, and the book is available for download there. Also, I wrote another book called How to Become a Financial Beast, which you can get on Amazon, I think, still for 99 cents. And those would be the two places to grab the book. I'd encourage you guys to do that. But you can always reach out to us, and we have plenty of assessments and other tools on our website that you can play through.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.